Welcome to this session of the future of facility management and thereby also the future of IFMA. There's no doubt that the last year have really been taking the toll of most of us. It's strange times where the COVID-19 situation has changed the whole setup around workplace, working from home, and has also influenced the industry. There's no doubt that with the situation at hand, we'll see a lot of change and a lot of new ways of working as we get into the wake of the pandemic, and hopefully also soon we can return to the offices. My name is Peter Ankerstjerne. I'm the global chair of IFMA. On a daily basis, I work with JLL, where I head up facility management and experience services globally. Before JLL, I spent some time with the ISS group, and I also had a short stint with WeWorks powered by We organization in Europe. Over the next 30 minutes, I'm going to discuss the context of facility management and especially the impact of COVID-19. We'll also spend some time on discussing how facility management is moving from being primarily a technical discipline focused around cost reductions and asset management into becoming a much more people-oriented function focusing on performance. And then finally, we'll talk about how IFMA will pivot to the situation and the change that we'll see through the industry, which IFMA will have to support on a long-term basis. But let's start with a really good quote, I think, which is very fitting to the situation that we are in from the award-winning economist Milton Friedman, who was the Nobel Prize winner a couple of years ago. He says, "Only a crisis, actual or perceived, produce real change. When the crisis occurs, the actions that are taken depend on the ideas that are lying around." I think this is very, very fitting to the situation we are in within facility management at the moment. Luckily, we have a lot of ideas lying around, and the change that we have seen over the past 8, 10, 12 years is really being accelerated at the moment while we are in lockdown and while the crisis is upon us. If you look at the historical development of facility management, if you look before the 80s, it was really primarily an in-house functions. There was some areas that were outsourced, mainly cleaning, security services, and maybe a few others. But most of facility management was performed in-house. Then IFMA was established in 1980, and during the 80s we saw a rapid professionalization of the industry with an increased outsourcing momentum. The industry was really formed by the furniture companies and later on also the building controls companies, where they begin to look at facility management and professionalizing the industry as an avenue of selling their products and their systems. When we got into the 90s, especially the late 90s, early 2000s, we saw the influx of some of the large service companies, Sodexo, ISS, Compass Group, as the big ones. We also saw the beginning of the real estate companies coming into that industry also and looking at the integration of facility management, both between the services that we were seeing and managing, but also between corporate real estate, finance, insurance, facilities management, and taking a more holistic view of that. These companies were, of course, companies. The big ones were JLL, CBRE, and Cushman & Wakefield. Lately, over the last 5 to 10 years, we have seen another change in FM, which really is around hospitality experience, driven largely by some of the co-working companies like WeWork, of course, but also Convene, Industrious, and others. And this is again changing the momentum in the industry and forcing a new change upon us. In 2007, 2008, we saw the financial crisis, which really had an impact on our industry in terms of further cost reductions and really doubling down in terms of how far can we take costs down, how much can we densify the workspace to get most out of our assets. I I think the COVID-19 situation is going to reverse some of that trend. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. But what we'll see with COVID-19 is that we will have to de-densify the space. We'll have to work much more on the experience and the purpose of why people coming to workplace. And then, of course, the whole work from home situation and the technology and digitization of FM is playing a huge role in our current environment, but especially even more in the future setup. FM will be a cultural enabler. We'll work very closely with HR, having a strong people focus, and we will begin to see space as a service, offices as a service, as we go into a much more mature market setup within our industry. When you look at the impact of COVID-19, we went through the lockdown in the first phase. Now we are in the middle of the second phase, and we still haven't really brought people back to the offices in great numbers. We see some of that in Asia Pacific, and Asia in particular, that people are getting back to the offices in great numbers. But in Europe and in North America, Latin America, Middle East, Africa, we are still in largely working from home mode, where we are looking at 20, 30, maybe to some industries, 40% occupancy rate, and having people back at the office at that time. So we are at that inflection point at the moment. And what we do next and how we react to this change is really going to be defining of the future of our industry. Some organizations will go back to what we call the new old normal, which is really about, not changing anything, just bringing people back to the offices, working as we did before the pandemic. Other organizations will pivot to the change and take advantage of the change and bring upon new change in terms of the way people work, where they work, how they work, and how we can create a competitive advantage in this next normal that we are talking about. I strongly believe that this is a huge opportunity for FM. We have been front and center of the development and of the change that we have seen in terms of the response recovery and the re-entry process. We have worked diligently with social distancing and with de-densifying space, taking out chairs and tables and doing walkways through the office to make sure that people were safe and secure. We have increased the hygiene levels and sanitations, also visually bringing some of the cleaners in so people could actually see that their desks were properly clean, and you could see that the hygiene levels was increased during touchpads and buttons and handrails and door handles and stuff like that during the workday. There's been more focus on health and well-being of staff than we've ever seen before. And we are seeing new technologies entering into the office with touchless technologies, but also with digital solution apps and stuff where people can book a table or register that they're coming into the workplace, even seeing who else is in the workplace at this point in time. So I can make sure that I meet some of my colleagues when I plan to go to work. This has been fueled, of course, by an ability to work from home. This was, some has labeled it, the largest experiment in the history of the workplace. And it's an experiment that worked. We were very, very quick in general to adapt to the changing environment. And we're now in a situation where around 75 to 85% of all the knowledge workers who are able to carry out work from home are in fact working from home, and it works, it's effective. And we are seeing production level almost at the same time, at the same level as we saw when we were at the office. For many businesses, it's even higher. But this work from home situation is not going to go away. It will probably change, and we'll get back to that in a minute. It will change in numbers and the flexibility that it provides. But this is something that will continue also when the pandemic is over and we can get back to some kind of a normal. But it will have a dramatic effect on the amenities and how we use our facilities. It will have an effect on the technology and the digitization of the workplace, which is rapidly increasing in terms of speed and change. the requirements for home offices, and it also will have an impact on leadership, how we manage our team based on trust and outcomes rather than face time and input, as we saw before. So work from home is changing the dynamics of the workplace. There are some situations and some work that is better carried out at home, where we have a higher performance about how to manage distractions, focus for extended time periods, have more private conversations and think creatively. And there are some areas that are better performed at the office around servicing and supporting clients, collaboration, social interactions, being aware of what's going on in the business, and then also coach, mentor, and manage each other. So we need to have both of them, and they need to work closely together in some kind of symbiosis. 77% feel that they are productive working from home, and we saw that from a study that was carried out by the Workplace Evolutionaries over the summer. And even though the summer was published in June, but it happened in April and May, which now seem like ages ago. And there are probably other studies coming out that also alludes to the fact. But if you just take one statistics from that, we asked in the study, we asked how many do you expect will work from home 2 days or more during a week? Before COVID, it was around 21%, and the expectation is that after COVID, it is expected that that number will be above 60%, which is a dramatic change. It's a threefold change, and that will of course have an effect in terms of how we set up the offices and how we manage the portfolio of buildings. So work from home will expand the responsibility for facility management. We can no longer just focus on the office environment. We have to expand our view and our area of responsibility. Work now is not a place we go, it's not a destination, it's what we do. And we can do that from the office, from co-working facilities or flexible office setups, hoteling, that type of thing. Public places, coffee shops, airport lounges, and so on. And then, of course, from home. And it's going to be very situationally determined where it makes more sense to work, where it fits my daily rhythm to get more done in the setup that I have. And it also depends on how I can avoid traffic congestions, how I can get to the office. And we will see that the corporate head offices and the whole office layout, the portfolio of offices, will change. We'll see corporate head office that's going to be much more brand statements, and we'll see regional and local offices is going to be much more flex offices to avoid having heavy assets on our balance sheet. So this is a big change. The pandemic also forces us to work together in different ways that we have probably done before. The interface between workforce and workplace allows us now to focus much more on the human resources and the strategic transformation that the organization is going through. Recruiting talent, retaining talent, it's changing the office layout to allow people to work in different ways, in more collaborative ways, to allow for social interactions. Those areas are going to be important. Currently, we have 4 generations at work. We have people that are at a very young age coming straight out of college that probably will require to be at the office to a larger extent than some of us that are working from home. And we have older generation who also needs to come to the office from time to time. And that group is getting older and older as the average lifetime extends into the future. So we need to build this collaborative ecosystem of the workplace where I believe that facility managers can be the facilitator of that change, collaborating with corporate real estate and IT, and also HR. And HR is going to be a very important part of that. And we can bridge the gap between these supporting functions and be the center of attention in that whole change process. That will require us to adapt our workplace strategies to this new reality. We need to have a discussion with our HR colleagues, with our corporate real estate colleagues, with IT, but especially also with the leadership, the CEO's office. about what is the purpose of the workplace going forward. What do we want to do at the workplace? How do we want to collaborate? How do we want to work together? And what is the setup of the workplace that makes sense here? So working with workplace strategy is going to be an enormously important part of our remit as we move forward, and having that responsibility. In a recent survey we did through IFMA, the experts assessment, the future of work, the Delphi survey is also referenced as. We asked this question: who should lead this great transformation at work? The answer was quite interesting, as HR was seen by the majority of respondents as the biggest change enabler for that transformation. Secondly came the CEO office, and then came workplace and facility management on the third level. But I think it's going to be an amalgamation, a combination of these three areas within the organization. But there's no doubt that this is an important part, and we have an opportunity to sit at the table. I've been involved with the organization, IFMA, since 2005, and ever since that time, and probably way before, we have always discussed the opportunity of getting a seat at the table at the C-level. Now I believe we have that opportunity. And the C-level has seen how important facility management have been during COVID-19, and how critical we have been for carrying on the work and bringing people back to the office in a safe environment, but also allowing them to work effectively at home to whatever extent that requires the support of us. So I think the opportunity for us is very unique in terms of pivoting to the change and stepping forward and taking more responsibility in the strategic transformation that the organization will undoubtedly go through during and post COVID-19. As I mentioned, HR will be our closest ally in the future, but we have to change our mindset from the more industrial-oriented productivity framework, which I think is something that is very close to our DNA in facility management. We do come from that productivity mindset, the engineering mindset, where you have input, you work through a process, and then you have an output. But now we need to talk more about the knowledge economy and how we can work with performance, how we can work with complexity and collective intelligence, how we can work in areas where we are not always visible, because people are not always visible at the office. They will be dispersed, they will work from anywhere. We'll have to allow for innovation and constant learning and all the soft skills that we've talked about. And then also, as I mentioned before, a new managerial style where it's much more based on autonomy and initiatives that may not necessarily happen at the office environment. When you talk about human performance, it is really heavily impacted by the quality of the workplace. In a recent study that was carried out by JLL, we went in and looked together with HR functions and some of the large companies that participated in the survey, where HR was identifying some of the low performers, average performers and high performers, and how the workplace supported their performance from a subjective point of view. And the feedback was that 96% of what was so-called the high performers were really satisfied with the space and the technology available in the workplace. So the way we work with the workplace, the design, the setup, and the technology has a direct impact on performance when people are at the office and when it makes sense to be at the office. And that also requires us to make a change. So the definition of facility management changes. The fundamentals around facility management, around safety and support, will stay, of course, and also that cost optimization ability that we have to work with budgets and to be, steady, predictable in the way we're managing the whole portfolio of buildings and the setup around the facilities. But there's a new element that has come in over the last 10 12 years, which is really around the workplace experience, around creating that community and engagement and the role we can play in that, around hospitality and having a mindset where people, want to come to the office, not because they have to, but because they want to. They want to have the social engagements. They want to have the fun lunch experience. They may even come there because of the good coffee and the social connections you can have over a cup of coffee or water cooler talk or that type of thing. And now lately also, especially during COVID-19, we'll see health and well-being also being part of the facility management larger remit and responsibility area. And again, as I said before, I think this is a huge opportunity for us to pivot and change the way we're working with FM now and in the future. So we have to think of facility management in a wider context. It's not only about cost and cost optimization. It's really about a return on investment in people. Kate Lister, who is a member of the IFMA family, has made some great studies around that and what it costs and the benefits of doing that. But if we can get our people to work at a higher performance level, the investment we can put into this by far offsets the investments into creating better workplaces. And we just need to be more precise on the documentation and be able to carry out that dialogue together with our HR colleagues. Our role in the future will really be to provide a seamless experience no matter where you work. It's about adaptive, digital, responsible, and now also, of course, resilient enterprises. It's about the digital elastic workplace ecosystem consisting of the workflows, the workforce, and the digital workplace setup, how we work online and how we collaborate online. But it's also about the facility strategies, about the physical workplace. How is the workplace set up when we are there, when we are working from there, when we need to be there? What are the building and the technologies, how the intelligence, the smart setup around the buildings, how is that performing and how is that designed? And of course, how is the entire portfolio of the organization, if it is a large organization with a large portfolio? What is owned by the company? What is leased? But also what is flexible? And what is maintain part of the steady setup of the organization. And that directly links into the brand of the organization, the culture, the values, and then of course the health of not only the organization, but also of the people working there. And let me give you an example in terms of the brand and how important it is. I believe that we'll see the office is here to stay without a doubt. And it's very important, maybe even more important than it has ever been. But I think we'll see a change where the corporate head offices are going to be much more brand and cultural statements of organizations. And then, as I mentioned before, regional, small, local offices, hubs around the world are going to be much more flexible, where the setup could be with some of the flex office providers. Nike is a fantastic example of that. I had the pleasure of visiting their head office a couple of years ago, and that is really one of the biggest brand statements I've ever seen. Everything around there is sports. You see football fields, you see basketball courts and everything like that when you walk into the office. And when you're there, everybody dresses and the whole setup is soothing sports and athletics and those types of things. And I think we can learn a lot from that also in other industries like banking, the IT sectors, all other corporate head offices, to say, what is the brand statement we wish to make with our office and our office design, the layout and the culture of the organization. And I think we'll see a lot of change in that area. That doesn't mean that it's not important to have that brand statement also in a regional office, but you could do it at a smaller and much more flexible and also much more cost-effective scale when we get down to that level. When we talk about this, we also need to adapt to a new reality around the technology and the digitization of the workforce and the workplace. When we're seeing robotics coming in to our industry at large numbers now, the IWMS systems are developing. We are using more and more IoT and sensor technologies, and of course also cloud and mobile technologies, especially now 5G is upon us. So this is an important part, but we have to keep the end user experience at heart. It's really around how can we make that workplace experience seamless when you're not there on a daily basis, when you're having that liquid workflow from home, from on the fly and from the office. How can you easily book a desk? How can you see that you have colleagues that are at the office? So the chances of randomly walking in and connecting with somebody while you're there increases tremendously when you actually know that they're there. And if they're not there, maybe there's no point of coming to the office that day. About occupancy sensors and using that effectively, and then of course having these experience app where you even can order things online. You can see what's on the menu of in the canteen on a particular day. That may also be part of the reason of coming to the office or staying at home. So for the FM function, this means that there is a continuity and a productivity anywhere set up that we need to begin to work with. Also, where we as facility managers will have to take responsibility for people working at home, making sure they have the right setup, the ergonomics, the safety, those measures that are in the home environment. It's also, and it's going to continue to be still for some time on, about cost containment and making sure that there is a return on investment to whatever we do, and that the office is of course managed effectively and cost effectively as we go forward. Even though as I'm claiming there will be a change from cost optimization to people focus and the return on investment in people, we still have to manage cost diligently, of course. And then of course it's going to be around safety and well-being with an employee first attitude, even to an extent that also transcends the normal barriers of the corporation, i.e. working from home, taking care of nutrition, exercise, health and well-being in all aspects of what that means. And that's, I think, also is a responsibility for facility managers. So the future of facility management and how does the future of a facility manager look like? I think building on top of our technical competence and expertise, the engineering mindset that we have had and that has served us so well in the past will continue to serve us well in the future. But we need to adapt other mindsets in order to be able to fulfill some of these criteria and opportunities for the future. So we're gonna adapt some kind of a psychology mindset, and the example, of course, is Sigmund Freud. I don't think he was an organizational psychologist, but having an anthropological and organizational psychology mindset, understanding the people that are working in the organization, how they perform, how they engage, how they work on a day-to-day basis. Using data and technology and being able to analyze the data to make these changes. Being innovative and have an inventor's mindset in terms of creativity and boldness to try new things. And finally, and maybe most importantly, having a leadership mindset. Courage, standing up for what we believe in, being the stewards of a higher purpose than just managing the facilities. And I think sustainability will fall into that leadership category as we move forward. So these are some of the mental changes and we'll see in the facility managers going forward. So what does this mean for IFMA? Well, it means that we're going to develop our training curriculum and our platform. Our flagship credentialing programs, Essentials, FMP, SFP, the CFM, will continue and they will be upgraded. We're working on micro-badging where you can take individual courses under the CFM or FMP umbrella. And we'll start up a training framework with partners and new programs like the Workplace Evolutionaries Workplace Strategies program. And that training program was introduced a couple of years ago by one of my predecessors, Graham Tier, who was the chairman of IFMA 2 years ago, but it's still highly relevant and something we can use with partners as we move forward. So having that partnership approach also when it goes to training is going to be critically important. We want to change the conversation around leadership and the policymakers. We are already lobbying in both Washington and Brussels. We have the Government Affairs Group that is working very diligently with getting access to policymakers and also in general with leadership. COVID-19 has provided the platform where we now have a voice and we are being heard about how we can bring people back to the office and back to the workplace, how we can work effectively with some of the things we have already talked about, that we need to use that momentum going forward. And then we want to be the voice of authority in the market. Research, opinions, points of views, networks, case studies, examples, input on everything related to FM and where the industry is heading, where we are heading as an association moving forward. We have to pivot to the situation. We have to provide new types of engagements and research, and the Delphi study we talked about before, the experts assessment, is something that we'll see much more of going forward. Also, the new standards that are coming out, especially the ISO 41000 standard for FM, and a big shout out to the team under the leadership of Stan Mitchell, who worked so diligently and so long with that standard. It came out in 2018, and I think it is a potential change maker for the FM industry. We have a strategy plan and we have a new planning process that we are kicking off soon. We have been set back a little bit by the COVID situation, but working on a new mission and vision statement for IFMA and plan how to grow the association going forward is going to be a critical part of what we're going to do. We're going to have more virtual engagement like this model we have around World Workplace this time, but also new hybrid conferences. Especially we are working with some really exciting stuff around World Workplace Europe in March, but you will also see much more around IFMA on social media. We want to reach a larger and more global audience, make the FM world smaller and connect with regional and local associations, both those that are already in the network, but also those that are outside. And I could mention local associations like the FMN in the Netherlands, the Danish Facility Management Association, SAFMA, MEFMA, and so on. And then we want to leverage our existing partners like ASHRAE and others to grow the industry and widen the market. What happens next is really a relaunch of IFMA training. It has already been launched here in November. IFMA has taken over the LMS platform and we are managing that and working on that now. There's a huge potential in this and something that has been performing well during the pandemic. We'll see much more of that going forward, especially with the micro-batching as I talked about before. We have a new model for conferencing starting now, but that will be further developed as we move along and as we get more experience. And no doubt that the new model that we will see around conferences will hopefully be one with a physical presence, but also a strong virtual setup around that, so we can make sure we get everybody from the world to participate and take part and really underline the international of IFMA. That's a huge opportunity and a huge step forward. We'll launch a new branding and marketing effort, and then we will find new collaborative partners, extending the reach of IFMA. That's going to be outside our industry, especially with other associations within HR, sustainability, IT and technology, but also association adjacent to FM, like cleaning, hospitality, corporate real estate, and those types of organization. We believe strongly that the future, despite the COVID situation, is really exciting. We are ready for the change. Are you? Thank you for your attention.